Tanks, but no tanks. Well, we might as well get as many pun titles out of the way as early as possible so they do not become titles for downloadable meme fodder in the 21st century. Anywho, released in 1982 for the Atari 2600 video computer system courtesy of ZMAG. Another wonderful name right there. Tanks, but no tanks has you controlling a tank, naturally, and in each round your goal is to defeat 20 enemy tanks who seek to destroy the last remaining outpost of humanity or something or other at the bottom of the screen. For if that outpost goes bye-bye, so does your game, regardless of how many lives you have left over, of which tanks but no tanks gives you 5. Clear all 20 enemy tanks and you move on to the next screen, which has a couple masses in the middle portion of the screen as obstacles. Clear 20 more and it's off to the third and final screen, which is a straight up open field with no obstacles in sight, which makes this the toughest challenge yet in regards to defending your home territory. And then the whole thing loops over and over until you eventually die or get bored, whichever comes first. Now, if the premise and overall layout of Tanks but No Tanks looks vaguely familiar, it's because it bears a striking resemblance to Namco's various tank games of the 1980s, such as the arcade titled Tank Battalion and later Famicom release and frequent habitant of pirate multicarts and bootleg Famiclone units everywhere, Battle City. The key difference here is that Tanks but No Tanks does not feature any destructible terrain or power-ups like the Namco titles do. It's your one lone tank against an army of 20 looking to knock you and your outpost off its perch. Said outpost also lacks any defensive barrier to protect itself from enemy assaults, so all it takes is one errant shot to end your game, though on the bright side, your end will not game as a result of friendly fire on the base. You can't simply shoot it to kill it like you could in the Namco games, so tank heavens for small favors, har har. Finally, there's also less variety here in terms of screen layouts. You only have 3 screens to play with and only 4 game variations, which are slight combinations of easy or hard games for either 1 or 2 players. For what it's worth, it plays competently enough. Controlling your tank is simple and fairly responsive fare. Only 1 shot on screen at a time, and the shots do take their time in traveling to get to that point, but you can cancel out other shots from foes with your own shots. I'm sure that makes sense somewhere. Getting shot yourself or colliding with another tank will cost you a life, and losing all your lives, or losing your outpost, is game over. Needless to say, Tanks but No Tanks can be a pretty tough game, especially since collision detection tends to be a bit spotty at times, but I would say there is a bit of a fun time to be had with this one. Clearly, if you've played games like Battle City, this is a more primitive and far more basic take on that type of game, but again, still fairly decent. Tanks but No Tanks is a rather bland looking game with rather blocky looking terrain and lots of flickering enemy tank sprites. There's a neat little gradient effect for the solid terrain, but that's about the only high point about the visuals of this game. The tanks themselves look okay for the most part whenever you could see them, of course, but the unfortunate Atari flicker rears its ugly head in grand fashion, with occasional bits of slowdown plaguing the game whenever too much is going on. Sound-wise, it's stock Atari sound. Static sounds for explosions, ticking sounds for rounds fired. It's not fantastic. Explosions sound last long enough to start getting grating after a while. It's par for the course in the magical world of Atari, so take it or leave it. Overall, Tanks but No Tanks is a pretty decent tank game of sorts with some simple yet challenging gameplay, somewhat hampered by some of the usual technical issues that usually pop up on some of these Atari games. It's not overly expensive for a loose copy if you're looking to add this to your collection, and it's a perfectly fine game for what it is, but these days, this is more of a novelty with little meat to it, especially when similar games of this ilk are much easier to access these days and are generally more complete games than what's on offer here. Still, this one's not so bad, so points for effort.